Have you ever felt that eerie chill creeping through your home, the kind that tells you something is terribly wrong, even when everything looks perfectly normal? I never imagined I'd be living that kind of fear, but one night changed everything for me and my daughter. We had just moved into a new house, hoping to leave behind the shadows of a dangerous man from my past. I thought we were finally safe, that the nightmare was over. But then, late one night, I woke up to the softest whispers coming from my daughter's room. She was speaking to someone, or something, she called Eli. At first, I brushed it off. Imaginary friends are common for kids, right? I told myself it was just her way of coping with the move, the stress of starting over. But as the minutes passed, the whispers grew clearer, more urgent. And then she said something that froze me to the core, a sentence only one man could have known. The very man I had fled from. Suddenly, the line between imagination and reality blurred, and I realized something terrifying. Eli wasn't just a figment of my daughter's mind. He was real. And he was inside our house. Have you ever had that gut-wrenching feeling that someone is watching you, someone who shouldn't be there? That's exactly what I felt, but worse, because this wasn't just about me, it was about my daughter. She was the one communicating with him, unknowingly, or maybe not. The person I thought I left behind had found a way back into our lives, hiding in the shadows of our new home, using my daughter as a bridge to reach me again. You might be wondering how long he's been there, or what he wants now that he's close. Believe me, the signs were subtle at first: forgotten objects reappearing, noises in the night, strange changes in my daughter's behavior. But the truth was creeping up on me, and it was more chilling than I ever expected. Stay with me, because what you're about to discover might surprise you. This isn't just a story about an imaginary friend, it's a story about a past that refuses to stay buried and a fight for safety that's just beginning. As the days slipped by, those small, unsettling moments grew heavier, like a shadow stretching across our lives. My daughter's laughter sometimes seemed hollow, her eyes darting toward corners where nothing should be. I found myself watching her, trying to decode the silence between her words, the pauses that felt too long, too loaded. There was a weight in the air, a presence that refused to be ignored. It wasn't just the forgotten toys or the strange noises anymore, it was something deeper, something rooted in a history I hadn't dared to face. If any of this resonates with you, if you've ever felt that creeping unease or sensed a hidden story behind a child's quiet moments, I'd love to hear what touched you most. Sharing your experience or even a feeling about this can create a space where we all feel a little less alone. After all, it's these conversations that turn stories into a collective journey, giving us strength to face what's unexpected. And if this story is stirring something inside you, curiosity, empathy, or even that quiet hope that answers might come, consider hitting that like button. Each like isn't just a number, it's a signal that these stories matter, that they deserve to reach more people who might need to hear them. It helps this channel grow organically, so we can continue bringing these moments to light, together. Subscribing might sound simple, but it means you're part of this unfolding narrative, choosing to walk alongside as the layers peel back and the truth becomes clearer. It's a way to stay connected, to keep the conversation alive, and to remind ourselves that even when the past threatens to take hold, we're stronger when we face it as a community. Your presence here truly makes a difference, more than words can express. So if you feel moved or curious, don't hesitate to share, like, and subscribe. Because what comes next is just as important, and I want you with me when we dive deeper into the story that's only beginning to reveal itself. The move was supposed to be a clean break, a fresh start far from the shadows that had followed me for so long. I packed what I could carry and left behind the life I once knew, convinced that distance alone would be the shield I needed. There was an almost desperate hope that silence, and the slow passing of time, would erase the danger lurking just out of sight. I believed that by stepping into this new house, I was stepping into safety. The house itself was unremarkable in many ways, a modest structure nestled among tall trees, far from the noise and familiarity of the city. To anyone else, it might have seemed like a quiet refuge, a place to breathe and rebuild. But from the moment I crossed the threshold, there was an uneasy feeling I couldn't shake. The layout seemed off, almost deliberately confusing. The basement stairs creaked underfoot in a way that suggested they hadn't been used in years, and the vents throughout the house whispered with the faintest drafts, as if the walls themselves were alive and breathing. The attic, dim and shadowy, held an odd stillness that felt almost too heavy to bear. Still, I told myself to ignore it. I needed to believe this was the right choice, that here was where I could finally find peace. I busied myself unpacking boxes, arranging furniture, and trying to make the empty rooms feel like home. But even as I worked, the feeling lingered, a subtle but persistent unease, like a warning I refused to heed. At night, the house seemed to change. The silence deepened in a way that felt unnatural, and every creak or whisper echoed louder than it should. I would lie awake, eyes fixed on the ceiling, listening for sounds that never came but felt as though they should. Sometimes, I caught glimpses of movement out of the corner of my eye, shadows shifting just beyond the reach of the light. I told myself it was my imagination, nerves catching up with me after everything I'd been through. Even with all that, I wanted to believe this was where the danger ended. I thought that by putting space between myself and the past, I could finally breathe easy. But the house seemed to resist that notion, as if it held its own secrets, waiting quietly to reveal themselves. The basement, with its cold stone walls and dark corners, felt like a place where time had stopped. The vents hummed softly, carrying sounds I couldn't quite place, and the attic loomed overhead like a silent watcher. I tried to focus on the small victories, the way the morning light streamed through the windows, the peacefulness of the surrounding woods, the rare moments when the house felt warm and lived in. But beneath it all was a persistent feeling that I wasn't alone, that the distance I sought to create was not enough. I came here hoping to escape, to start over, but the house seemed to whisper that some things don't stay buried. And as the days passed, I realized that the real challenge wasn't just finding peace, it was confronting the shadows that had followed me all this way. At first, Eli was just a name my daughter mentioned in passing, like a character from a story she'd made up. But soon, the way she spoke to him felt more urgent, more real. She'd lean her head close to the corners of rooms, her voice dropping to a whisper as if sharing a secret only Eli could hear. I watched her sit near the vents, where the cold air sneaked through, and wondered if she was trying to reach out to something hidden in the drafts. Her door, usually left open wide, was now shut tight more often than not, and when I knocked, she'd pause hesitant, before answering in a tone that was both distant and protective. I told myself it was just loneliness, an imaginary friend to fill the silence after we moved. After all, kids did that sometimes. They created companions when the world felt too big or too quiet. I didn't want to read too much into it, didn't want to feed any fears that might grow in my mind. Still, I found myself glancing at the empty spaces she seemed to be talking to, feeling a little shiver when no one was there. The house, with its creaks and sighs, only seemed to add to my unease. One afternoon, I caught her drawing in her room. Her paper was filled with strange shapes, twisted lines that didn't look like anything I recognized. She looked up quickly when I entered, her eyes bright and a little wild. "Eli helped me draw this," she said simply. "He says it's a map." I smiled, trying to keep things light. "A map to where?" I asked, kneeling beside her. She shrugged, tapping the paper. "To where he lives." The idea of a secret place, a hidden world only she could see, was both fascinating and troubling. I wanted to believe it was harmless, a game of imagination. But there was something in her voice, the way she spoke as if Eli was more than a friend, that made me pause. It wasn't just a name or a character. It was a presence. That night, I found myself listening closely to the house. The soft creaks of the floorboards, the whisper of the wind outside, even the faint hum of the vents where she spent so much time. I thought about the shadows I'd hoped to leave behind, the past I tried to bury. Was Eli just a child's invention, or was there something else here, something that had followed us? I decided to watch more closely, to keep an eye on the small changes that might reveal the truth. My daughter's attachment to Eli was growing, and though I wanted to protect her, I also needed to understand what, or who, Eli really was. The quiet moments when she spoke to empty corners no longer felt innocent. They felt like a door opening to something unknown, something waiting just beyond the edge of sight. And as much as I wanted to believe in the safety of childhood imagination, a part of me knew that this was just the beginning of a deeper mystery, one that I couldn't ignore any longer. The first time she mentioned the old oak tree behind our first house, my breath caught. It wasn't just any tree in the neighborhood, it was the same tree where I had hidden a small box of keepsakes during the worst days, a secret spot I never spoke of, not even to her. When she described the way the bark split near the base or how the twisted branch looked like a crooked finger pointing to the sky, I froze. How could she know that? I hadn't told her. No one had. Her words came with a casual ease, as if these details had been part of her world all along. But every time she shared something that belonged only to my buried past, a cold wave of fear swept through me. It wasn't just the information itself, It was the unmistakable sign that someone else had been there, someone who had accessed the parts of my life I thought were locked away forever. The man I had escaped, the one I never wanted to speak of again, was whispering through her, invisibly threading his presence into our daily lives. I tried to dismiss it at first, convincing myself these coincidences were just fragments of stories I had once shared in passing, or maybe my daughter pieced together overheard conversations. But the truth was far more unsettling. The precision of the details, the way she repeated phrases I had only ever heard him say, made it impossible to ignore. It was as if he had found a backdoor into her mind, and through her into mine. The unease settled like a shadow over our home. I watched her closely, noting the moments when her eyes would glaze over, or when she suddenly seemed to be somewhere else, lost in a conversation that no one else could hear. It was in those moments that the silence became deafening, charged with something unseen yet unmistakably present. I felt like a bystander trapped in a nightmare where the past was clawing its way back in, relentless and unforgiving. I struggled with how to protect her without exposing the darkness I had fought so hard to leave behind. She was too young to understand the gravity of what was happening, yet old enough to be caught in the middle of a silent war I couldn't explain. Every time she repeated those private details, it was a crack in the fragile wall I had built to shield us both. I realized that ignoring it wouldn't make it go away. It was a signal, a call to action, however terrifying that might be. The thought that someone was manipulating her, using the knowledge of our past to infiltrate our present, sent a chill down my spine. This wasn't just about old memories resurfacing, it was about control, about power over the very fabric of our lives. And worst of all, it was happening right under my nose, hidden behind the innocent voice of my child. I knew then that the silence I had clung to was broken, and the path ahead would force me to confront truths I had buried deep. The moment she spoke those words, it became clear, the battle wasn't over. It had only just begun. At first, I thought I was losing my mind. How else could I explain the sudden reappearance of objects I had long since thought gone for good? The photo, yellowed and creased, was one I had searched for years before resigning myself to its loss. The note, charred at the edges, had been carefully burned in the backyard after a night I wished to forget. And the bracelet, silver delicate, with a clasp that no longer worked, was something I had tossed away in a fit of frustration long before moving into this house. Yet, there they all were, scattered around the living room, as if placed intentionally to catch my eye. There was no hint of magic or fantasy here, no ghostly whispers or unexplained phenomena. Every inch of the house was familiar, every sound accounted for. The unsettling truth settled in slowly but firmly: someone had been inside my home. Someone with access, someone who knew my past well enough to know which items would sting the most. I began to scrutinize everything. The locks on the doors didn't seem tampered with, and no window showed signs of forced entry. But who else had keys? My partner? No, they had their own reasons to stay away. The neighbors? Impossible, they were all too distant or absent. The only other person who came and went with ease was my child, but that couldn't be the case. Or could it? I started to question the little things that had previously gone unnoticed: the slight shift in the arrangement of books on a shelf, the faint scent of perfume that didn't belong to me, the subtle traces of dirt on the floor near the back door that hadn't been there before. Each sign was a whisper, a clue, an invisible thread leading to a person who had infiltrated my sanctuary. But why? What was the purpose of this intrusion? The answer was tangled in the memories these objects evoked. Each one was a piece of a puzzle, a reminder of a time I had tried to forget or bury. Somewhere behind the surface, someone was forcing me to confront my past again, to open wounds I thought had healed. The unsettling part was how personal this intrusion felt. It wasn't random vandalism or theft. There was no attempt to steal valuables or cause obvious damage. Instead, it was a deliberate act of emotional manipulation. Whoever was doing this wanted to unsettle me, to remind me of who I once was, and perhaps to remind me of who I could never fully escape. I confronted my child one evening, carefully watching their face as I mentioned the objects. Their eyes flickered with something I couldn't quite place: guilt, fear, or maybe defiance. The conversation ended with no clear answers, but the seed of doubt had been planted. Was my child involved, or merely a pawn in a larger game? Determined to regain control, I began changing the locks, installing cameras, and setting traps to catch the intruder in the act. But the emotional toll weighed heavily on me. Every familiar item that appeared was a reminder that my past was not just memories. It was a living, breathing force capable of reaching into my present, destabilizing my sense of safety. In that realization, I understood that this was about more than just objects. It was about power, about someone trying to rewrite my story, to assert dominance over my life by unraveling the walls I had built around my history. The fight ahead was no longer just about protection or privacy, it was about reclaiming my identity, piece by fragile piece. The days that followed were a blur of whispered conversations and restless nights. I found myself constantly glancing over my shoulder, haunted by the faintest creaks and murmurs that seemed to seep from the very walls of our home. My daughter's words echoed in my mind, each phrase a chilling thread weaving a tapestry of unease. "He can hear us through the walls," she had said, as if that alone explained every shadowy presence I felt creeping along the edges of my life. I began to watch her more closely, searching for signs of fear or confusion, but instead, I saw something far more unsettling, a quiet resignation, as if the conversations she recounted weren't nightmares but rather a routine, an accepted reality. Her eyes would sometimes drift toward corners of the room where no one stood, and her voice would lower when she spoke about Eli, as if sharing a secret she dared not reveal aloud. One evening, after putting her to bed, I lingered in the hallway outside her room, the weight of silence pressing down on me. It was then that I heard it, a faint whisper, almost indistinguishable, carried on the breeze slipping beneath the door. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was unmistakably familiar, the same quiet insistence that had haunted my daughter's confessions. With a trembling hand, I pressed my ear to the door, straining to catch the elusive sound. It was as if the house itself was holding its breath, waiting for me to acknowledge the presence it refused to let go. Determined to confront the unseen force, I began to explore every inch of the house. Rooms I once considered safe now felt like traps, corridors stretched longer in the dim light, and the walls seemed to close in with every step. I found old photographs tucked behind loose wallpaper, images of a family I didn't recognize staring back at me with hollow eyes. Among them was a picture of a woman whose expression mirrored the sadness my daughter said Eli spoke of, the woman who used to cry in the dark. The realization hit me hard. This was not just a haunting but a story frozen in time, a pain that had seeped into the foundation of our home. I started keeping a journal, documenting every strange occurrence and every word my daughter repeated. It became a lifeline, a way to make sense of the fragmented conversations and the eerie familiarity that clung to them. Each entry revealed more about Eli's presence, about the sorrow he carried and the way he tried to reach out, not to harm but to be heard. It was as if the house itself was a vessel for his unfinished story, a silent plea for acknowledgement. Despite the fear that gripped me, I knew that shutting myself off would only strengthen the hold this presence had over us. I began to speak aloud, inviting Eli to share his story, to release the pain that bound him here. One night, my daughter and I sat together in the dim glow of a single lamp, and I asked her to tell me everything Eli had said. As she spoke, the room seemed to shift, the oppressive weight lifting just enough to let a fragile hope seep in. This was no longer a battle against an unknown enemy, but a chance to heal a wound that had long been ignored. Together, we would face the darkness that lingered between the walls and piece by piece, reclaim the story that was rightfully ours. It started with a faint scratching sound that I barely noticed at first. It was late at night, and the house was silent except for the occasional creak of settling wood. But this was different, a subtle rhythmic scrape echoing from the crawlspace beneath the floorboards. I told myself it was just a branch brushing against the siding or a restless animal outside. Yet, the noise persisted, growing more deliberate and frequent over the following days. One afternoon, while searching for a misplaced tool in the basement, my eyes caught something odd on the concrete floor. Tiny crumbs scattered near the corner where the walls met the floor. They looked like remnants of food, maybe breadcrumbs or bits of cookie. At first, I thought it must be from a forgotten snack or a mouse dropping trail, but as I looked closer, the crumbs seemed too large and too deliberately placed to be accidental. My unease deepened when I climbed up to the attic to check the insulation. As I pushed open the hatch, a fine layer of dust stirred into the air, revealing fresh disturbances around the edges. The dust wasn't just displaced, it was as if someone had been climbing in and out recently, their movements deliberate but careful, avoiding the creaky boards that would betray their presence. The realization hit me like a wave. Someone had been inside this house, slipping in and out without us knowing. Panic welled up inside me, cold and sharp. The walls that once felt like a shield, a sanctuary for my family, now felt like a cage. The very house I had trusted to protect us had become a trap, hiding secrets within its shadows. I imagined him quiet, unseen, moving through the spaces we thought were ours alone, watching, waiting, living in the cracks of our daily lives. I replayed every strange sound, every unexplained movement, under this new light. The missing items, the faint footprints on dusty surfaces, the subtle shifts in the air. It all pointed to the same terrifying truth: he was here. Not just lurking outside, but inside, blending into the fabric of our home like a ghost we couldn't grasp. The question wasn't anymore if he had come in, but how. The crawl space, barely large enough to crawl through, was the obvious entry point. I remembered the old wooden panel I had dismissed as a maintenance hatch, never suspecting it could serve as a gateway. The scratches near its edges weren't random. They were the marks of someone determined, someone patient enough to find a way in and out without raising alarms. I felt a surge of protectiveness for my daughter and myself. This wasn't just about property or privacy, it was about safety, about reclaiming our space from this invisible intruder. The house, once a place of warmth and laughter, now carried a chill that seeped deep into my bones. I knew then that we couldn't ignore the signs any longer. We had to confront this hidden presence, to illuminate the darkness where he had been hiding. The path ahead was uncertain and frightening, but staying silent was no longer an option. Our home had been violated, and it was time to take it back. The moment I heard the faint creaking beneath the floorboards, a shiver ran down my spine. It wasn't just the usual house-settling noises anymore. Something was moving down there, something deliberate. Then came the whispering, barely audible but unmistakably close, echoing from behind the vent in the corner of the room. My heart hammered in my chest as I looked down at my daughter, her small face pale and eyes wide with fear. Without hesitating, I scooped her into my arms and hurried to the nearest door, locking it behind us with trembling hands. I pressed my ear against the door, straining to catch every sound. The footsteps continued, soft, deliberate, slow, and the whispers seemed to grow a little louder, more insistent. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was chilling, as if the intruder was taunting us from just inches away. I held my breath, trying to steady my racing thoughts, all while dialing 911 with one hand and clutching my daughter tightly with the other. Time felt like it stretched and folded in on itself. Every second was a mix of dread and hope, a desperate wish for the police to arrive before the invisible threat could break through our fragile barrier. I felt utterly helpless, trapped in my own home, knowing that whoever or whatever was lurking inside was only separated from us by a thin wall. The isolation was suffocating. I whispered reassurances to my daughter, though I wasn't sure if I believed them myself. The minutes dragged on, each one marked by the faintest noise, a scuffle near the vent, a muted thump beneath the floor. I could almost feel the presence moving, breathing, searching. The house that had once been a sanctuary now felt like a cage, the walls closing in with every sound. I wanted to scream, to run, to do anything to protect my little girl, but all I could do was wait and hope. Finally, the distant sound of sirens cut through the tension, a lifeline piercing the darkness that had settled over us. I could hear the voices of the officers as they approached, their footsteps echoing down the hallway. Relief surged through me, sharp and overwhelming. But when the police arrived and began their search, the intruder had vanished. No trace, no sign of forced entry, nothing but the lingering chill and the echoes of those footsteps under the floor. The officers assured me they would do everything possible to find him, to bring him to justice, but deep down I knew the damage had already been done. The invader had disappeared into the shadows, leaving behind a silence heavier than any noise. I held my daughter close, feeling the fragile thread of safety stretch thin but refusing to let it break. That night, everything collided, the safety of home, the innocence of childhood, and the terrifying reality that evil could hide just beyond the walls we trusted most. The officers moved carefully through the crawl space, their flashlights slicing through the thick darkness. What they uncovered was chillingly intimate, a small, crudely fashioned sleeping area nestled amidst the dirt and exposed pipes. It was clear someone had been living there, hidden from the world, sustained by nothing more than what could be smuggled in or scavenged. Scattered around the makeshift bed were food wrappers, some fresh, others worn and faded, evidence of a long secret occupation. But it wasn't just the physical traces that unsettled me. Among the clutter, they found old photographs, images of me from years past, moments I had long tried to forget or at least pushed to the back of my mind. There were also objects from my past, belongings I hadn't seen in ages, items that should have been safe in storage or discarded but instead had been taken and kept here, as if someone had been collecting pieces of my life like trophies. The realization was suffocating. This was more than a break-in, it was an invasion of my history, my identity. Someone had been living beneath us, watching and waiting, piecing together a narrative only they knew, one that revolved around me. When I confronted my daughter again, her eyes held a mix of fear and confusion. She hesitated before admitting the truth, that he had told her to keep him a secret. She hadn't wanted to betray him, perhaps out of fear, loyalty, or the twisted bond formed in the shadows. The weight of her confession settled heavily between us. It wasn't just about protection, it was about control and manipulation. And then the truth hit me like a cold wave. He didn't come back for her. He came back for me. Everything clicked into place, the way he had watched from the shadows, the carefully chosen items from my past, the hidden space in the crawlspace. This wasn't random or opportunistic. It was personal. He wasn't just an intruder, he was someone who had been obsessively fixated on me, someone who had returned not to reclaim what was lost but to confront me, to unearth a past I thought was buried. The horror wasn't just in the danger he posed, but in the intimacy of his intrusion. He had been living beneath our feet, invisible yet omnipresent, waiting for the right moment. The safety I had felt within my own home was shattered, replaced by a creeping realization that the past I tried so hard to escape had found a way back in. As the police documented everything, I felt a cold resolve settle over me. This wasn't just about surviving the night anymore, it was about reclaiming control, about standing firm in the face of someone who had tried to erase my boundaries and rewrite my story. My daughter's bravery in speaking out, despite her fear, was a beacon amid the darkness. Together, we would face what was left behind in the shadows and make sure that no part of that hidden life could ever threaten us again. It's unsettling to realize that danger doesn't always announce itself with loud warnings or visible threats. Sometimes, it hides in plain sight, nestled quietly beneath the roof where you feel most safe. The chilling truth is that someone you once feared, someone whose presence cast a long shadow over your past, can return without fanfare, slipping silently into your child's world, altering it in ways you never imagined. That silent infiltration is what makes the fear so profound and the fight so personal. As I look back on everything that has unfolded, I confess that the weight of this reality is terrifying. It's not just about the immediate threat, it's about the lingering possibility that the past can reach forward and touch the present in the most unexpected ways. My daughter's courage to speak up, to expose the darkness she faced, has been our strongest armor. But it also reminds me that vigilance doesn't end with one confrontation or one night of survival. It's ongoing, a quiet determination to protect the sanctity of home and the innocence of childhood. This story isn't just mine. It belongs to anyone who has ever felt powerless when faced with unseen dangers, anyone who has struggled to reclaim their peace after shadows tried to rewrite their lives. By sharing this, I hope to shine a light on those hidden threats and encourage others to listen closely, to trust the instincts that tell them something is wrong, even if it's hard to name or understand right away. Awareness and courage are our best defenses. If this story has moved you or opened your eyes to the fragile line between safety and threat, I invite you to comment below. Share your thoughts, your experiences, or simply your support. When you like and subscribe, you're not just helping this channel grow, you're joining a community that refuses to turn away from uncomfortable truths. These stories are warnings, lessons in disguise, and your engagement helps keep the conversation alive. Together, we can create a space where silence is broken, where fear is met with strength, and where no one has to face their shadows alone. Thank you for listening, for standing with us, and for being part of this journey toward reclaiming safety and peace.